The photograph shows Shan Haines exactly as Elkhart, Kansas remembered him. Smiling, confident, wearing a suit that suggested success but not ostentation. The kind of man you'd trust with your money. The kind of CEO who mowed lawns in his spare time and worked the chain gang at high school football games. The kind of neighbor who'd help you fix your tractor or co-sign a loan when times got tough. That was late 2022. Shan Haines was 51 years old, and his future looked impossibly bright. He was the CEO of Heartland Tri-State Bank, a $139 million agricultural bank serving one of the most rural parts of America. But his influence extended far beyond the wheat fields and cattle ranches of southwest Kansas. He'd recently finished serving on a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau advisory committee. He was the sitting chairman of the Kansas Bankers Association. He'd even served on the board of the American Bankers Association, rubbing shoulders with the most powerful people in finance. Mo Houts, a former bank loan officer and shareholder, remembered accompanying Haines to Washington for a lobbying trip. They stepped into a packed elevator at some government building, and someone tapped Shan on the shoulder. "Hey, Shan, how's it going?" It was Janet Yellen, the Secretary of the United States Treasury. She knew him by name. That's the kind of guy Shan Haines was. At least, that's what everyone in Elkhart thought. 2 years later, Shan Haines sits in the Federal Correctional Institution in Leavenworth, Kansas, serving more than 24 years in federal prison, the longest sentence for a white-collar crime in Kansas history. He's not there because of some complex financial engineering or elaborate long-term fraud. He's there because he fell for one of the oldest scams in the book, reinvented for the cryptocurrency age. And when he realized he'd been conned, instead of coming clean, he tried to steal his way out of it. $47.1 million from his own bank in just 8 weeks. The scam that destroyed Shan Haines's life collapsed Heartland Tri-State Bank and devastated a small Kansas farming community has a darkly poetic name. They call it pig butchering. You fatten the pig before you slaughter it. You build trust, show early returns, convince the victim they're making money. Then you demand more and more and more until there's nothing left to take. If stories like this fascinate you as much as they do me a favor and hit that like button. These aren't just tales of greed and fraud. They're warnings. Reminders that smart people, successful people, trusted people can make catastrophic mistakes when they convince themselves they've found an opportunity nobody else understands. Shan Haines didn't need money. That's what made his fall so shocking. He had a solid salary. His bank was successful. His reputation was golden. People in Elkhart didn't just respect him. They loved him. Jim Tucker, an Elkhart farmer and member of the bank's board, put it simply, "Shan was the picture-perfect image of a guy you'd want running your small-town bank. He mowed yards and coached sports teams. Most everybody liked him. The board members at Heartland Tri-State actually worried about losing him." At 51, with his youngest daughter approaching graduation and his industry profile rising, they figured it was only a matter of time before a bigger bank poached him. Or maybe he'd become a full-time lobbyist in Washington. The man knew everybody. He understood agriculture. He could explain farm country economics to coastal elites in a way that made sense. He was going places. Then something changed in December 2022. At first, no one noticed. How were they able to? Shan Haines continued to arrive at work each day with the same self-assured grin, made choices that appeared to be sound nonetheless. Still enthusiastically discussed the bank's future. In private, however, something had entered his mind. Or rather, his phone had been compromised. The encrypted messaging app WhatsApp, which is used by billions of people for daily communication, is where the scam started. Shan Haines was contacted. This person's identity is still a mystery. The only term used by federal prosecutors to describe them is unidentified co-conspirator. They knew exactly what buttons to push, though, regardless of who they were. The pitch began modestly. A cryptocurrency investment opportunity. Nothing extraordinary, just an opportunity to profitably invest in digital assets. Haynes was initially dubious. He ought to have remained doubtful. He had actually made a joke about cryptocurrency in a 2022 interview with Bank Director magazine. He had stated that his board's top priority was raising awareness of cryptocurrency. He had joked, "These guys are worried about the bank's response to digital currencies, and we just got indoor plumbing a few years ago." He was aware of the dangers. He had likely warned dozens of clients about cryptocurrency scams in his capacity as a banker. He was aware of the cautions. Go through the articles. Realize that there were many scammers in the cryptocurrency space who preyed on those who were unfamiliar with the technology. He was more aware. However, the WhatsApp user was good. Excellent. They presented Haynes with what looked like authentic trading sites, screenshots of accounts with outstanding balances, testimonials from other investors who reportedly made a lot of money. Additionally, they reported on banks in Oklahoma and Denver whose executives were already wealthy and invested. Haynes began modestly. To test the waters, he only used a few $1,000s of his own funds. Amazingly, it appeared to be effective. Gains were visible in the account. The returns appeared authentic. He was urged to increase his investment by the WhatsApp user. This was the stage of fattening. Establish trust. Demonstrate success. Before the pig is killed, make sure it is comfortable. By early 2023, Sean Haynes was fully hooked, but he'd run through his personal funds. So he started taking money from the people closest to him. $60,000 from his daughter's college fund, his own daughter's education money. He told himself he'd pay it back with the profits. It was just temporary. Just until the big returns came through. Then he took $40,000 from Elkhart Church of Christ, the church where he worshiped, where he'd built relationships over years, where people trusted him not just as a banker, but as a fellow believer. Another $40,000 that he convinced himself was just a short-term loan from God's house. He'd pay it back doubled when the crypto investment paid off. He took $10,000 from the Santa Fe Investment Club, friends and neighbors who'd pooled their money together for investments, people who trusted his financial judgment, people who would never suspect their banker was stealing from them. He liquidated nearly $1 million in stock from the Elkhart Financial Corporation. This was the holding company that owned Heartland Tri-State Bank. This was the shareholders' investment. The accumulated wealth of farmers and teachers and small business owners who'd put their faith in their local bank. And Sean Haynes cashed it out to feed into a cryptocurrency account he'd never actually verified was real. But it still wasn't enough. The person on WhatsApp kept demanding more money. There were always new requirements: fees to unlock the funds, verification deposits to prove the account was real, taxes that had to be paid up front. Every time Haynes sent money, there was another reason he couldn't withdraw his supposed profits. Another barrier. Another excuse. By May 2023, Sean Haynes had exhausted every legitimate source of funds he could access. His personal accounts were empty. His daughter's college fund was gone. The church money was gone. The investment club money was gone. The stock was liquidated. He was tapped out. Any rational person would have stopped, would have realized they'd been scammed, would have gone to authorities, admitted their mistake, faced the consequences. Sean Haynes wasn't rational anymore. He'd gone too far down the rabbit hole. He'd convinced himself that the cryptocurrency account was real, that there were $40-something million sitting in a Coinbase wallet with his name on it, that all he needed was to send just a little bit more money to unlock those funds. Then he could pay everyone back, cover his tracks, make it all disappear like it never happened. So, on May 2023, Sean Haynes crossed a line that turned him from victim to criminal. He made his first wire transfer from Heartland Tri-State Bank's funds, $5,000, just to test if it would work, just to see if anyone would notice. Nobody did. Over the next 8 weeks, Sean Haynes would make 11 wire transfers from his bank to cryptocurrency wallets controlled by the scammers. The amounts grew larger, more desperate. 5,000 became 50,000. 50 became 500,000. He was draining the bank's liquidity, maxing out credit lines, using his authority as CEO to bypass the wire transfer policies the board had put in place specifically to prevent this kind of thing. By early July, Haynes had transferred $47.1 million out of Heartland Tri-State Bank, from a bank that had total assets of $139 million. He'd effectively stolen 1/3 of the bank's value. And still, the person on WhatsApp kept telling him he just needed to send a little bit more to unlock his profits. On the morning of July 5th, 2023, Sean Haynes made a phone call that showed just how far gone he was. He called his friend Brian Mitchell at 7:40 in the morning. "Brian, I need your help, and you're the only guy who can help me," Haynes said. Mitchell asked what was wrong. Haynes pulled out his phone and showed Mitchell what appeared to be a cryptocurrency account balance. $40 million, maybe $42 million. An impossible sum. "I've got this money and it's in cryptocurrency, and I need $12 million to help verify the funds," Haynes explained. $12 million more dollars. After he'd already sent $47 million to verify funds that didn't exist, to unlock an account that was pure fiction. Brian Mitchell saw through it immediately. "You're in a scam, dude. You're in a scam," he told Haynes. Then Mitchell asked the crucial question. "Is this bank money you're playing with?" "No, Brian," Haynes lied. But it was bank money. All of it. And within hours, state banking regulators would discover what Haynes had done. When they saw the massive wire transfers draining the bank's reserves, they knew immediately what had happened. They closed Heartland Tri-State Bank, called the FBI, and started trying to figure out how one of Kansas's most respected bankers had just destroyed a century-old institution in 8 weeks. FBI agents arrived at Haynes' home. They didn't come with handcuffs initially. They came with questions. And Sean Haynes, who'd spent the past 8 weeks lying to everyone around him, finally told the truth. He admitted everything. The WhatsApp messages, the cryptocurrency scam, the wire transfers, the $47 million that had vanished into digital wallets somewhere on the other side of the world. "We believe that the CEO's dominant role in the bank and prominent role in the community contributed to a reluctance on the part of Heartland employees to question or report the alleged fraudulent activities earlier," federal investigators later wrote in their report. Nobody wanted to question Sean. Nobody wanted to believe that the guy who mowed lawns and coached sports teams and worked the chain gang at football games could be stealing millions. The collapse of Heartland Tri-State Bank devastated Elkhart. The FDIC stepped in to ensure that depositors didn't lose their money. If you had a checking account or savings account at Heartland Tri-State, you were protected by federal deposit insurance. You got your money back. But the approximately 30 local shareholders who actually owned the bank through the holding company, they lost $8.2 million, multiple generations of accumulated wealth, farmers who'd invested the profits from good harvest years, teachers who'd put aside money for retirement, small business owners who'd built equity over decades, all of it gone. The value of their stock dropped to zero because the bank's only asset was Heartland Tri-State Bank, and Heartland Tri-State Bank no longer existed. For a town of 2,000 people, losing a bank isn't just a financial blow. It's personal. The bank employed people. It financed local businesses. It held the mortgage on half the homes in town. It was part of the community's identity. And now it was gone because their trusted CEO had fallen for a cryptocurrency scam and tried to steal his way out of it. The FBI investigation moved quickly. Special Agent Sage Hemmert led the case from the Bureau's Garden City office. "I've worked white-collar cases before, but I've never worked one with this amount of loss or with this many victims significantly affected," Hemmert said. Working with inspectors general from the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the Federal Reserve Board, and the Federal Housing Finance Agency, the FBI team set about following the money. That's always the key in financial crimes. Where did the money go? Can any of it be recovered? The challenge with cryptocurrency is that transactions are designed to be anonymous and irreversible. Once you send Bitcoin or Ethereum or any other digital currency to a wallet, it's gone. The scammers can move it through multiple exchanges, multiple wallets, across multiple countries, making it nearly impossible to trace. Most victims of crypto scams never see a penny returned. But the FBI's Complex Financial Crime Squad and Cybercrimes Task Force got lucky. They traced the flow of Haynes's stolen funds to an offshore digital wallet that still contained more than $8 million. The scammers hadn't moved it all yet. Maybe they got sloppy. Maybe they didn't expect law enforcement to track them so quickly. Whatever the reason, the FBI was able to seize the funds. $8 million. It wasn't the full $47 million Haynes had stolen. It wasn't even close. But for the shareholders who'd lost everything, it was something, a chance to recover at least part of their life savings. Reed Tomey, a forensic accountant in the FBI's Kansas City field office, spent weeks tracing the digital breadcrumbs. "We were able to get a significant portion of the funds back for the individuals," he said. But getting the money back was only half the battle. The other half was making sure Sean Haynes faced justice for what he'd done. Federal prosecutors moved quickly. Haynes was charged with embezzlement by a bank officer. It's a federal crime that carries serious penalties because banks operate under federal charters and protection. When you steal from a bank, you're not just stealing from private investors. You're undermining the entire banking system that keeps the American economy functioning. Haynes pleaded guilty. There wasn't much point in fighting it. The evidence was overwhelming. The wire transfer records showed exactly where the money had gone. The WhatsApp messages showed the scammers manipulating him. His own admissions to FBI agents laid out the entire scheme. A trial would have just been an expensive exercise in confirming what everyone already knew. The only question was sentencing. How much prison time should Sean Haynes serve for stealing $47 million from his own bank? His attorney argued for leniency. Haynes was a victim too, they said. He'd been duped by sophisticated international criminals. He hadn't intended to steal. He genuinely believed he was making an investment that would allow him to pay everything back. He'd cooperated fully with investigators. He'd shown remorse. The prosecutors saw it differently. Yes, Haynes had been scammed initially. But once he started taking other people's money, he became a criminal. When he stole from his daughter's college fund, that was a choice. When he took money from his church, that was a decision. When he embezzled from his investment club, from the bank's shareholders, and finally from the bank itself, those were all conscious acts. He'd had multiple opportunities to stop, to come clean, to ask for help. Instead, he'd kept digging deeper, stealing more, lying to everyone around him. And the lie to Brian Mitchell was particularly damning. When his friend asked directly if he was playing with bank money, Haynes looked him in the eye and said no. That wasn't the confusion of a scam victim. That was the calculated deception of someone who knew exactly what he was doing and was trying to hide it. In August 2024, Sean Haynes appeared before a federal judge for sentencing. The courtroom in Wichita was packed. Bank shareholders who'd lost their life savings, employees who'd lost their jobs when the bank collapsed, community members who felt betrayed by someone they'd trusted, media from across Kansas and beyond. Everyone wanted to see what would happen to the man who'd destroyed one of the state's oldest small-town banks. The judge sentenced Sean Haynes to 293 months in federal prison. That's 24 and a half years. The longest sentence for a white-collar crime in Kansas history. Haynes was 53 years old. He wouldn't be eligible for release until he was in his mid-70s. His daughters would be middle-aged. His grandchildren, if he had any, would never know him outside of prison visiting rooms. The sentence reflects the seriousness of the defendant's crimes and the devastating impact on the victims, the U.S. Attorney's Office stated. But for many in Elkhart, no sentence could undo the damage. The bank was gone. The jobs were gone. The community's trust was shattered. And the question everyone kept asking was the same. How did this happen? How does a man who literally joked about cryptocurrency scams in published interviews fall for a cryptocurrency scam? How does someone who advised customers about financial fraud become a victim of financial fraud? How does a banker who understood risk management and due diligence wire $47 million to anonymous criminals he'd never met? The answer is both simpler and more complex than you'd think. Shan Haines fell victim to what psychologists call escalation of commitment. Once you've invested time, money, and emotional energy into something, it becomes incredibly difficult to admit it was a mistake. Every dollar you lose becomes a reason to invest another dollar, because admitting you lost the first dollar means admitting you were wrong. And successful people like Shan Haines, who've built their entire identity around making good decisions, find it especially hard to admit they made a catastrophically bad one. The scammers understood this perfectly. They started small, a few $1,000s. When that worked, Haines felt validated. See, it wasn't a scam. The returns were real, so he invested more. And when those returns showed up, he invested even more. By the time he'd drained his personal accounts and started stealing from others, he was so deep into the lie that the only way forward seemed to be going deeper. Admitting the truth would mean losing everything. Continuing the lie offered the hope, however irrational, that he could still make it all work out. It's the same psychology that keeps people in failing businesses, the same instinct that makes gamblers chase their losses, the same cognitive trap that turns smart people into criminals. Sunk cost fallacy combined with desperation equals catastrophic decision-making. The pig butchering scam is designed specifically to exploit this vulnerability. The name comes from a Chinese proverb about fattening a pig before slaughter. In financial terms, it means building trust and showing early returns to make the victim comfortable investing more. The scammers create elaborate fake websites that look like legitimate cryptocurrency exchanges. They show impressive returns that appear real. They have testimonials, charts, market analysis, everything a legitimate platform would have. Except none of it's real. It's all just theater designed to extract money. If you're finding these deep dives into financial crimes as fascinating as I am, take a second and hit that like button. These stories aren't just entertainment. They're warnings about the psychological vulnerabilities we all share. Smart people, successful people, careful people can all fall victim to scams when the right psychological buttons get pushed at the right time. After Haines' sentencing, the focus shifted to the victims. The shareholders who'd lost their $8 million. The FBI had recovered $8 million from the cryptocurrency wallets. The question was whether that money could be returned to the people who'd lost it. On November 4th, 2024, victims gathered in a federal courtroom in Wichita for a restitution hearing. Judge John W. Brooms would decide how the recovered funds would be distributed. Most victims had resigned themselves to losing everything. When a bank fails and you're a shareholder, not a depositor, there's usually nothing left. The FDIC protects depositors, but shareholders are at the bottom of the priority list. They get whatever's left after everyone else is paid. And in this case, what was left was nothing. Emily Thompson, a forfeiture specialist for FBI Kansas City, was in the courtroom that day. She'd worked on the case for months, helping to trace and seize the cryptocurrency assets. She knew how much the victims had lost. She knew these were farmers and teachers and small business owners who'd invested generations of accumulated wealth into their local bank. She knew that $8 million, while substantial, wouldn't make everyone whole. But it was something. Judge Brooms announced his decision. The recovered $8 million would be distributed to the shareholders as restitution. Nearly all of their money would be returned. The courtroom erupted. Cheering, clapping, crying. People who'd walked into that room believing they'd lost everything suddenly learned they were going to get their money back. There was cheering and clapping and crying because these people went from thinking they had lost $8.2 million to being made aware they were going to be made very near whole. Special Agent Hemmert recalled. It was an extraordinarily rare outcome in white-collar crime. Most victims of financial fraud never recover their losses. The money disappears into offshore accounts, gets laundered through shell companies, or simply gets spent by the criminals on lavish lifestyles that can't be liquidated fast enough to provide meaningful restitution. The FBI's quick work in tracing and seizing the cryptocurrency before the scammers could move it saved the victims. But while the shareholders got their money back, Elkhart still lost its bank. The building still stands empty. The employees who worked there had to find new jobs, many of them leaving the community entirely. The farmers and small business owners who relied on Heartland Tri-State for financing had to establish relationships with banks in other towns. The convenience of having a local bank that understood agricultural lending, that knew the customers personally, that had been part of the community for generations, that was gone forever. Jim Tucker, the farmer who'd served on the bank's board, put it in perspective. We got our investment back, thanks to the FBI, but we lost something you can't put a dollar value on. We lost trust, we lost a piece of our community, and we lost our belief that we really knew Sean Haynes. That last part is particularly haunting. The people of Elkhart didn't just lose a bank. They lost their faith in their own judgment. If Sean Haynes, the guy who mowed lawns and coached sports and helped neighbors through hard times, could steal $47 million, who else might be lying? What other trusted community members might have secret lives? It's a corrosive doubt that spreads through small towns like poison. The WhatsApp scammers who orchestrated the pig butchering scheme have never been identified. The unidentified co-conspirator mentioned in federal court documents remains anonymous. They're likely in China or Southeast Asia, part of organized crime syndicates that run dozens of these scams simultaneously. They're professionals who've honed their psychological manipulation techniques across thousands of victims. They know exactly how to find vulnerable targets, build trust, extract money, and disappear before law enforcement can catch them. The FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center received more than 69,000 complaints about cryptocurrency fraud in 2023 alone. Total losses exceeded $5.6 billion. That's billion with a B. And those are just the cases that got reported. Many victims are too embarrassed to come forward. They don't want to admit they fell for a scam. They don't want their friends and family to know they lost money to anonymous criminals on the internet. So they suffer in silence, absorbing the financial and emotional damage without seeking help. Sean Haynes is now inmate number 01345 at FCI Leavenworth. He shares that facility with other white-collar criminals, drug offenders, and various federal inmates. He's not in a maximum security prison. He's not in solitary confinement. He's just another prisoner serving a long sentence in a medium security federal facility. He wakes up when they tell him to wake up. He eats what they give him to eat. He follows their rules. And he has more than 2 decades to think about the 8 weeks in 2023 when he destroyed his life, his reputation, and his community's bank. His attorney has said he's remorseful, that he understands the magnitude of what he did, that he wishes he could undo it all. But remorse doesn't bring back Heartland Tri-State Bank. Regret doesn't restore the trust that was broken. And 24 years in prison doesn't erase the fact that for 8 weeks in 2023, a trusted community leader made a series of choices that hurt everyone around him. The Heartland Tri-State Bank case has become a cautionary tale in banking circles. Industry publications have written extensively about it. Banking conferences feature sessions on how to prevent similar incidents. The American Bankers Association, where Haynes once served on the board, now uses his story as an example of how even experienced bankers can fall victim to sophisticated scams. The key warning signs are always the same: pressure to act quickly, promises of unrealistic returns, demands for more money to unlock previous investments, communication through encrypted messaging apps with people you've never met in person, fake websites that look legitimate but can't be independently verified. Anytime an investment opportunity has multiple red flags, it's not an opportunity, it's a trap. But the Haynes case also highlights a deeper problem with bank governance. How did the CEO of a small bank have the authority to wire $47 million without multiple layers of approval? Where were the internal controls? Where was the board oversight? Where were the external auditors who should have noticed massive fund transfers draining the bank's liquidity? The FDIC's report was blunt. We believe that the CEO's dominant role in the bank and prominent role in the community contributed to a reluctance on the part of Heartland employees to question or report the alleged fraudulent activities earlier. In other words, Shan Hans had so much trust and authority that nobody dared question him. When he told employees to process wire transfers, they processed them. When he bypassed normal procedures, nobody stopped him. When his behavior became erratic, nobody reported it. That's the danger of concentrated power in small institutions. In a big bank, there are multiple layers of checks and balances. No single person can move millions without approval from several others. But in a small community bank with a trusted, respected CEO, those safeguards can break down. People assume the CEO knows what he's doing. They assume he has information they don't. They assume that if he's doing something unusual, there must be a good reason. And those assumptions create vulnerabilities that criminals, both external and internal, can exploit. Since Haynes's arrest and conviction, Heartland Tri-State's story has been featured on true crime podcasts, banking industry websites, and fraud prevention seminars. It's become a case study in how psychological manipulation can turn victims into criminals. How the sunk cost fallacy can lead to catastrophic escalation. How even smart, experienced people can make terrible decisions when they're desperate and convinced they've found a way out. The unidentified scammers who ran the pig butchering operation that destroyed Shan Haynes are still out there. They're probably running similar scams right now, targeting other victims. Maybe someone in your community. Maybe someone you know. Maybe if the right approach hits at the right vulnerable moment, even you. That's the terrifying thing about sophisticated fraud. It's not always obvious. The criminals aren't always easy to spot. The red flags aren't always bright red, and the victims aren't always people who seem like they'd fall for scams. Shan Haynes was chairman of the Kansas Bankers Association. He knew financial fraud inside and out, and he still lost $47 million to anonymous criminals he never met. As of early 2025, Elkhart, Kansas is still recovering. The town has survived. People still farm the land. The high school still plays football. Life goes on. But there's a scar where Heartland Tri-State Bank used to be. A constant reminder that trust, once broken, takes generations to rebuild. And that sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who hurt us the worst. Shan Haynes will be 77 years old when he's released from prison, assuming he lives that long and serves his full sentence. His daughters will have built their lives without him. His grandchildren, if any, will know him only as the grandfather who's always been in prison. His legacy in Elkhart will forever be defined by those 8 weeks in 2023 when he tried to steal his way out of being scammed and instead destroyed everything he'd built. The $8 million the FBI recovered sits in accounts now, being distributed to the shareholders who lost everything. It's a rare, happy ending to a financial crime story. but it's only happy in comparison to the alternative. The bank is still gone. The jobs are still lost. The community's innocence is still shattered. $8 million can't buy that back. And somewhere in Leavenworth, Shan Haines wakes up every morning in a prison cell, knowing that he did this to himself. That every wire transfer was a choice. That every lie was a decision. That at any point during those 8 weeks, he could have stopped, could have confessed, could have faced consequences that would have been painful but survivable. Instead, he kept going, kept stealing, kept hoping that just one more transfer would make everything okay, until the day state regulators discovered what he'd done and the whole house of cards collapsed. The pig got fattened, and then it got slaughtered. Except in this case, the pig was Shan Haines's entire life.